In our introduction today, we gave him his glowing reviews as a distinguished professor, an attorney, an all-around expert on everything we're talking about tonight, which mostly is this surge of anti-Semitism on college campuses. We know it's nothing new. It's been happening all over California campuses for 25 years now. Thane, so we just like your opinion, commentary, and if there is a solution to this worsening BDS enforcement on college campuses. Thane, take it away.
Well, Gary, I would say this is one of those topics that I would prefer not to be an expert on, because it's a very painful topic. The reason, among other reasons, it's painful is that for many years, most people in the general public, and certainly Jews, whether they live in Canada or the United States, didn't even know this was going on. This is what plagued the children and grandchildren of Jews in Canada and the United States. But most people were not aware of how much incredible hostility is directed toward Israel and how much punishment is directed toward Jews that don't openly denounce Israel. This idea, I think most people don't even believe that it's happening. And I think one of the great virtues of today's program is that you're making it clear and unmistakable that this is on campus and it crosses states and countries. We're seeing this all over North America. This has been going on for several decades, but we're only now, it's coming to light in part because it's been adopted by many of the people who once deployed these tactics, who have now entered the private sphere, whether it's newspapers, publishing, museums, the corporate suite. So we're seeing the same kind of pro-BDS anti-Semitic disguised as anti-Zionistic behavior. We're seeing it in the public sphere. But it has been going on for a long time. And there were people like me who always believed naively that it was confined to the university. And thank God it dies at the university, and then students graduate and they grow up and they read more thoroughly and they're not as indoctrinated by their professors, and they develop their own independent thinking. But that's not what's happened. What's happened instead, that it is infected and penetrated the private sector, and what you're seeing on campus, you're seeing now in everyday life. Again, whether it's in museums, publishing, newspapers, journalism, broadcast journalism, you're seeing it everywhere. One of the things that's interesting that's on campus that I think most people don't realize is that it's not just that it's disguising anti-Semitism and as anti-Semitism. It's worse than that. It's essentially saying to Jews, you have to prove to us that you are a religion and not a people, that you are not a nation. The only nation you are is the United States or Canada. You don't belong to another nation. We will respect you and your religion, but you have to step outside of your religion and denounce Israel as a human rights violator supreme and as a colonial settler enterprise. And unless you do it openly, publicly, we won't let you run for student government. We won't allow you to eat kosher food. We will boycott anything and everything unless Jews openly declare their hatred of Israel and their willingness to boycott Israel and divest from Israel. Of course, the problem here is that Jews are not just a religion. We are also a people and a nation. And that people and nation has always been the Israelites and Israel, even during the 2,000 years when there wasn't in Israel. Our identification was always next year in Jerusalem. Why do you think we say that? We said that because we always understood our nation to be the Jewish state of Israel. And so this is actually a very clever and cynical tactic that's being deployed against Jews, and especially, I would say, vulnerable Jewish students who come to campus and they want to have friends and they don't want to fight and they want to study and go into medical school or law school. And they want to, they don't want to be pressured and castigated and denounced as a pro-Israel sympathizer who therefore believes in the apartheid of Palestinians and the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. One remedy here is that our students are woefully inadequate to respond to these charges. Somehow we've allowed them or encouraged them to get high SAT scores, but somehow they get like a C- or a D+ in their ability to argue the case and the moral necessity of a Jewish state and its geographic identification, its identity, and again, the identity between Jews as a religion, as Judaism, and Israel as a nation and homeland. And that argument can be dispelled very easily, but our students are woefully inadequate to do so. Our faculty members tremble, Jewish faculty members tremble every day because they want to get tenure and they want to have friends. Everybody wants to have friends. It's nice to have friends. I understand. But when you want friends, what you have is this. You have this sort of unleashing of a unilateral attack against Israel. It is not directed at any other country that are true human rights violators. And these slanders and libels against the Jewish people, that they are colonialists, that that there's ethnic cleansing in Israel, that Israeli soldiers are teaching American policemen how to subdue African Americans. These are just vile blood libels, and we are not adequately addressing them. One thought solution is just to make sure that two things. One, our students know how to argue the point. I'm deeply pessimistic how it is so pervasive on campus. I don't know whether students can overcome this. I think the next time you speak to a Jewish faculty member, you should say, do you defend Israel on campus? Are you prepared to do so? Or are you just one of those people who wants to go along with this charade that Israel is the greatest human rights violator in human history? But I think the single most important thing that can and should be done is stop writing checks to universities. Stop writing checks. Stop. You don't need to do it. Your nephew's not going to get into that school anyway. Forget it. There's other places for him or her to go. This nonsense of people, Jews, who are loyal to their alma maters, but are terrified about picking up the phone and calling the president and saying, I am very distressed about what I'm hearing on campus. When I think of some of these universities, frankly, Oberlin, Vassar, Berkeley, how Jews who graduated from these places, NYU, where I used to be for a number of years, where Jews who graduated from these places are not making their voices known and voting in the proper way for what they want to see happen by simply stop writing checks and making sure that university officials are aware that we're watching you. We see this, what is not even thinly veiled anti-Semitism. We want to call it out for what it is. And we're wondering why in an era of wokeness and identity politics, Jews are not entitled to their own identity politics. Jews are no longer a marginalized minority. Jews are suddenly a colonialist majority. How did that happen? Because it's totally absurd. And so I think that one thing that I've spoken around the country, and people look at me and they're just puzzled by this, that Jews are writing checks to the very same places that are proponents of anti-Semitic propaganda and anti-Israel propaganda disguised as a human rights issue. And our Jewish students are not ready to respond. And frankly, nor should they be in some ways. It is an unpleasant task to ask of, young students. But it is one way to respond, right? One way to respond is because If faculty is not responding, as we know from university life today, there is a wrong way of thinking and there's a right way of thinking. There's no marketplace of ideas. It's only one way of thinking. And if you stand outside or question those ideas, you're immediately labeled a racist, a homophobe, an Islamophobe. And so it is an unfortunate thing and a terrible burden to ask of students. But I'm not sure that we have a better solution because it's unimaginable, I think, for most people to see how uniform and how pervasive this is throughout every phase of campus. This kind of behavior is tolerated. Anything that is anti-Israel is seen as a human rights issue and not seen for what it is, which is blatant anti-Semitism.
I think one of the things, Thane, that regarding these students and wanting to be friends with everybody is not learning from history. In 1930
Yes.
in Germany, when the Jews who were liberal or non-observant, we didn't have a country per se, but we still were a people. And they seemed to feel that, oh, if I'm just a good German first and I'm a Jew next, I'll be okay. Well, they weren't okay. And I don't know if they don't teach history and Holocaust in colleges anymore, if that's become taboo because of BDS. But that's the situation. These times we're living through right now, for me, are too reminiscent of 1930 Germany. When my grandparents narrowly escaped, and most of their, my other ancestors did not. And it was the exact same thing. First at the little universities, the colleges in Germany, the gymnasium, they didn't let Jews be on the sports teams or be on the debate teams. And that is what I think we're heading for if we, meaning us who do speak out, don't do something about it. So any closing comments before we move on to our next guest?
Well, all I would say to that, Gary, is that Jews don't believe that, right? They don't believe what you just said. They say, oh, come on, Gary, the same as Nazi Germany in the early 1930s. Look at the power that Jews have throughout the United States. Look at the influence they have in the Western world. People don't, this is why Jews just simply don't count in the world of identity politics. It's just that Jews themselves simply don't believe what you're saying. You're right. You're absolutely right. The parallels are unmistakable. But they see you as a hysteric, and they say, what Gary Brathman just said to us is like what people say about Trump being Hitler, right? Trump is many things, but I've said this before, whether you like him or not, he's not Hitler, right? He's many things, but that he's not. But we've allowed this casual talk to go on, and the people would respond to you by saying, yeah, it's the same thing, trying to pretend that this is 1933 Germany, that we're on the eve of Kristallnacht. And I think that's, and then the last point I want to make, Gary, is when you said what is being taught in Holocaust classes. Well, let me give you this last anecdote, which is perfect for today's segment of your show, Never Again, which is that at Oberlin University, an African-American history professor said, we should not be teaching the Holocaust at Oberlin because the Holocaust is merely white-on-white crime. It doesn't count. It's white-on-white crime. And I have really nothing else to say other than that anecdote, Gary.
Thank you so much for being with us again. We look forward to the next time. Thane, who's, again, a distinguished professor, an attorney, a leader, and a friend, thank you for taking the time to be with us today, and we hope we'll see you again soon.
Anytime for you, Gary.
Be safe and happy Hanukkah.
You too, my friend. Thank you.
נפש יהודי